Welcome back to Vox Terra. Today, Biden's speech on the anniversary of the January 6th insurrection. Now, yes, I'm going to criticize Joe Biden, but no, I do not think we would have been better off with Donald Trump as president, if for no other reason than at the very least the Biden administration is more responsive to the environmental movement. But I'm going to contrast Biden's speech, and especially 3 points in particular, with what I believe a President Sanders would have said, because it's so important not just to look in the rearview mirror, but because I think some of those points are much more compelling and would break through much better, as well as some issues that were left out. Well, Sanders would have focused on that threat to our democracy from wealth and power accumulating at the top. And in particular, he would have mentioned in the hands of the fossil fuel, and I'll add petrochemical industries, and what I'll call the reckless elements of the business community. Well, point one, kudos to Biden for mentioning voter suppression. And I say kudos for that because it's a concrete and actionable issue. I like things that are concrete and not overly vague. So in the case of voter suppression, people could have a debate over whether polling place access should be expanded or limited. Hours made longer or shrunk shorter. Well, for that, I'll post you a link to an article from the Texas Tribune that I thought broke it down nicely in a fairly unbiased fashion. Well, focusing more on the negative here, 2 comments I found somewhat unhelpful or even diversionary, we could say, was where Biden mentioned Trump's ego. Now, he didn't mention Trump by name, but he did say, because his bruised ego matters more to him than our democracy or our Constitution, he can't accept he lost. Now, while there may be some truth in that statement, if you believe Trump is on your side, that ain't gonna faze you. Now, second, after he discussed the threat to democracy from home, he then went on to take the opportunity, in my opinion, to bring in China and Russia. From China to Russia and beyond, they're betting the democracy's days are numbered. Well, I'll get to why I feel that comment is not helpful, and what I think would have been helpful to put in. Well, first, the bruised ego narrative. It skips the economic interests that are behind Trump and behind those Congress members that supported his bid to not certify the election. There has been massive amounts of petrochemical and fossil fuel funding going towards Trump and his agenda. Yet that is barely talked about by the media and certainly not by Joe Biden, but it would have been by Bernie Sanders. So let me cite for you an article from Public Citizen. It's a Ralph Nader-founded organization. Let me just read you the headline. And Ralph Nader is a consumer rights and environmental activist long-standing. Since 2016, 65 fossil fuel corporate PACs contributed $8.8 million to members of Congress who denied democracy and supported Trump's push to overturn the election. Their words. But let's note, whether you are convinced of that narrative in an attempt to overturn an election or not, this article highlights the influence of those moneyed interests. That's not being talked about. And by leaving that out, you're leaving the floodgates wide open to what I call the false conspiracy narratives and the portrayal of Trump and those members of Congress as the heroes standing up to elites. Not a good idea. Now, similarly to not mentioning those interests, by bringing up Russia and China, and in my opinion, especially China, we should question what economic interests are served by that. What interests in general are served by taking every opportunity you've got to just sneak in a little China bashing. Well, focusing on a foreign adversary as your enemy, in my opinion, serves the purpose of distracting from change at home to a large extent. I'm not saying there's no reality in that, but to a large extent. Look, I've heard about China used as an excuse going back to the 90s to not cut back on our fossil fuel emissions. Well, that's a wow, isn't it? And in the case of China, maybe less so with Russia, it fuels prejudice against people who look Asian. Well, this is Cold War 2.0. Weren't you tired of Cold War 1.0? Well, look, Cold War 1.0, what was the underreported results of that? What agendas were hiding there? I'll tell you some similar agendas that are hiding now, I believe. I did for you a video about the devastation wreaked in Ecuador by fossil fuel interests, and how that government that was facilitating that devastation was one supported by, quote, us during the Cold War in the name of fighting communism, fighting socialism. That was the agenda snuck in with that. And I'd imagine if we looked at some of those countries where we believed we were fighting for freedom, there was some pretty big just disparities of wealth there being enforced by those regimes. Another interest served is a massive military budget. And you might think, like I did, that we need this massive budget to protect ourselves. Well, but there's more going on than that, and that's the part you should be questioning. I'll provide you a link to an article showing the CEO pay at some of those large defense contractors. $14 million a year. Now, don't forget, they got lobbying power too, and connections to major media outlets. Is that why no one's talking about $14 million a year? And if you're listening to what I call fake conspiracy media, are they highlighting for you that $14 million a year? Or are they leaving that out? Okay, and in the case of upgrading the nuclear arsenal, that's one that's really against our interests in terms of just living creatures. What about all the radiation being generated from that? And lastly, what I feel was left out, the opportunity not taken, was to highlight the threat to democracies from climate change. Well, what do you mean by that, you might ask? Well, what I mean by that is as this planet is heating, weather patterns are becoming destabilized, less reliable, more prolonged drought, more prolonged heavy and intense rains and flooding, wildfires, and think crop and water insecurity, as well as changes in disease vectors. Well, that means life on Earth, human and non-human, is getting stressed. And in the case of humans, we're going to look for answers. And many will gravitate towards those angry, barking voices offering up what I consider fake conspiracies, because the real, if you want to call it conspiracy, is being overlooked. And those angry, barking voices, as far as I'm concerned, are the same people, or at least the same mindset that got us into this mess in the first place. So put that brain of yours to work towards exposing what I think Bernie Sanders would do, the actual moneyed interest behind some of this anger, and then put your mind to work towards doing the hard work of looking for real solutions. How are we going to green this economy? And what are the elements in the way of doing that? Well, hey, I hope you found this video really helpful and interesting and at least food for thought. And if you did, well, please make sure you are subscribed to my channel. You have clicked that there notification bell. You are commenting, you are liking, and as always, until next time, peace be with you.